Hello again, everyone. I am Chris Scher, and this is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. Robert Harding, Justin Ritzel. Yes, we are excited because, as Robert loves to say, what's coming up this weekend, Robert?
Playoffs.
You got it. NFL playoffs, folks. And not only is it the playoffs, I mean, think about how much things have changed, Robert. When we did the video last Wednesday, we had no idea that the next day, boom, to quote John Madden, the announcement came out that mobile sports betting was going live in New York State 2 days later on Saturday. The world has changed. And we're going to talk about that. But first, we're going to discuss the coaching changes in the NFL. And I think I'd be remiss not to say that Brian Flores getting fired by the Dolphins was a shocker, an absolute shocker to me. I didn't think he was in any danger. I mean, they had the 7-game losing streak. I mean, they won the first game against New England, lost 7 in a row, including a horrible loss in Jolly London to the Jaguars. And then, of course, Robert's Bills beat the crap out of the Dolphins twice in that losing streak. And then Miami got on a roll. They won 7 in a row, got to 8-7, controlled their own destiny. They'd won the last 2, but they put up a stinker in Tennessee 2 weeks ago, lost 35-3, and then they did a great job beating New England. I give the Dolphins credit. They had nothing to play for in that game, just pride, and they came out and won that game convincingly and really did a number on the Patriots. So it was a great game for Miami. So, I was stunned that Brian Flores was fired. Absolutely. Now, all of a sudden, these reports come out that he wasn't getting along with Tua. He wasn't getting along with Chris Greer, the Dolphins general manager. There's a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about. I mean, we've been around sports long enough, guys, to know that what goes on in that locker room usually stays in the locker room. And there's so much stuff that never comes out that fans never know about. Okay. Dysfunction and different things. We understand that. But the way this thing just turned for the Dolphins, I'm still amazed that this happened and some of the things that are coming out about Brian Flores and that he got into an argument with Tua at the halftime of the Titans game. And, there's all this stuff saying that he was tough on the players and to me, it's like a football coach is supposed to be tough on his players. That's not really anything new. I mean, look, I don't expect the coach to be, oh, golly gee, you didn't do that well, do better. I mean, look, coaches yell. That's part of pro sports to me, in my opinion. Some coaches are yellers. Not all of them, but some of them. I'm sure Bill Belichick yells at some of his players, okay? There's a lot of coaches who yell at their players. So that's not really a stunner to me that Brian Flores might have been yelling at his players. But still. So other coaching changes. I mean, we know the Giants dismissed Joe Judge yesterday. I think that was deserved. The Vikings flushed out the general manager, Rick Spielman, used to be the Dolphins GM, as well as Coach Zimmer. The Bears fired their front office, Pace and Nagy. Who else am I missing here that fired coaches? This on Black Monday, basically.
Denver,
yeah. Vic Fangio, he got fired on Sunday. And, of course, the Raiders are looking for a coach, although you want to think that they're going to keep the guy they got right now because they're in the playoffs. And, of course, we know the Jaguars are looking for a new coach, too. So I think there's, 6 vacancies? So, Justin, go ahead. What are your thoughts on some of these NFL coaching changes that we've seen the last few days?
Well, Chris, you're right about the Dolphins. We don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but when you just look at the actual product on the field or the roster that's been assembled, I don't understand why, as much as we like to poke fun at you and poke fun at some of the things he did when he first got the job, but I don't know how you can look at Brian Flores and make him the scapegoat for what's going on in Miami. That the issue with that team is draft selections, that you guys accumulated all these prime draft picks and really didn't do anything with them. I mean, obviously some of those guys, some of those first round picks, they're their NFL careers have a long way to go. But aside from maybe one or two guys, how can you really be excited about a lot of that? And player development is a big part of a coach's responsibility, but to just use so many of those assets and not get at least a few blue chippers out of that, to still not have a quarterback that is your guy, that falls on the general manager. So the fact that the Dolphins didn't make a change there as opposed to coach doesn't really make sense to me. But I think really the theme of this kind of firing cycle is you just look at all the quote unquote proud NFL franchises that are just kind of lost at sea right now. The Dolphins, obviously they were one of the more popular NFL teams in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and they just can't seem to get things right. Obviously, a lot of that goes back to like I mentioned a minute ago, they don't have that quarterback. But, the Bears, a team that should have infinite resources, but never seem to get their front office and coaching staff right. The Giants, you can make an argument, are the most embarrassing franchise in the league right now. To go 5 years without a winning season, it's been even longer since obviously they've won a playoff game. I think you have to go back to, I don't know, maybe their Super Bowl year, 2011. Just because he has the last name Mara does not mean we should respect the decisions that John makes. I think he was a little too concerned with all those taunting penalties to forget that, hey, dude, you have an NFL team to run. And it's kind of a little concerning. It took them a couple days to finalize a decision on Joe Judge. That guy should have been out in his butt Monday morning. Hell, maybe Sunday. You kick him out right after the game. I mean, that guy wasn't going to lead your team anywhere. He's not a good coach. And he's making excuses in press conferences and making all these weird comments about oh, this stuff's trending in the right direction, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not. The franchise is an embarrassment right now. Feel for Giants fans who deserve a little better. But that's just, it's going to be an important time for a lot of these franchises, obviously, that either have stunk for a long time and have kind of gone through this process before and haven't been able to figure it out. And then teams like the Vikings, who have actually been somewhat respectable on the field, a couple winning seasons here in the last several years. We'll see what kind of changes they make to really boost them into the level they need to be a year in and year out winner, which they were not with Mike Zimmer. So, but I think there's some interesting openings. I think the Vikings is a pretty good situation, and some of these other spots have, at least, if nothing else, good young quarterbacks that you can say, oh, there's something to build on here.
Robert?
Yeah, for me, there's different reasons why some of these coaches were fired, and different situations. I really lump the Broncos in with the Dolphins to a degree, because if you look at Vic Fangio's situation in Denver, that was not an ideal situation. The front office cannot get the quarterback position figured out. That defense was pretty good. They've got some solid weapons on offense, but they don't have the right signal caller. And if you can't get the quarterback position figured out in the NFL, you're not going to win too many games. And, that's a failure of the front office. That's not a failure of Vic Fangio. And so I think, in that case, I get why, based on the records, he was fired, but I think the front office did him no favors. Same thing in Miami with Flores. Flores had 2 winning seasons in Miami, and in both of those winning seasons, they narrowly missed the playoffs. They win one game in each of those seasons, win one more game in each of those seasons, and they're probably in. Just crazy that, they decide that, we're not anywhere near where we should be, and we need to make a coaching change. That team needs a GM change. Greer's a failure. In his tenure as a GM, he's had one, playoff team. This is the guy that, he ditched Gase, brought Flores in. Now he's going to have another coaching change. Doesn't reflect too well on the general manager. And that's before we get to the draft situation. I mean, this is the guy who decided that he didn't want Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase on his team. He'd rather trade down and then ends up with Jalen Waddle, who obviously, great talent, but he's no Jamar Chase and he's no Kyle Pitts. I think Waddle will be a great, NFL receiver. He'll certainly post numbers and have a lot of success, over the middle and as a slot receiver. He is a bit of a deep threat as well. But, you look at what Chase has done, you look at what Pitts has done. It's tough to say that, the Dolphins made the right call there. And then we go back to the draft 2 years ago with the decision to take Tua instead of Justin Herbert. And then obviously that doesn't look good either. That's, even worse than the decision to move down from the number 3 spot in this past year's draft. So I think Flores was in a bad situation, similar to Fangio, in that the front office did not put together a team, that could compete. And certainly that defense in Miami, similar to Denver, very good unit. They did struggle for part of the season, but they got it all together, as the season went on. And, they were a big reason why the Dolphins were able to reel off that winning streak there. The Vikings job, I think, is going to be the most appealing of these, just because of the talent pool that's already there. You got Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, still some solid pieces on the defensive side of the ball, although that unit did underachieve with Zimmer this year. So, I think that'll be, an appealing job for a coach. The Giants are a mess. This is a franchise that, I know that we have Giant fans in our area, but it's funny how, they thought everything was hunky dory during those years with Coughlin and Manning, and they won those pair of Super Bowls. And people forget that, when they weren't winning Super Bowls, they weren't winning. They weren't that successful. And then once they stopped winning Super Bowls and, the Coughlin firing a few years later, when he stopped winning, and then we've seen what's happened since then, where, largely they've struggled to put together winning teams. It's a mess. The situation there is a mess, from top to bottom. They don't have a franchise quarterback. Who knows what the future is with Saquon Barkley, because, you could maybe blame it on other parts of that team, but he hasn't looked the same since his injury, and they can't seem to get other positions figured out either. So, as for the Raiders situation, because you mentioned this, Chris, and I know that, they did not fire their coach this past week. Gruden was let go earlier in the season, but Bisaccia there, I think he's earned the full-time job. I mean, I think the Sunday Night Crew mentioned this stat that, there's never been a team that's made the playoffs with after a coaching change mid-season. And I think that speaks to, what Bisaccia did with that team, that, he was able to lead them there and win a huge game against the Chargers. That really was for me, the thing that sealed the deal, that, this guy has earned his right to be an NFL head coach and to lead the Raiders going forward. So I don't think there should be a, vacancy to fill there. I think they have their guy. For other teams, though, it's going to be a bit of an adventure this offseason because, especially if you're the Giants and the Dolphins, two teams that have had a lot of coaching changes over the years, you're going to want to make sure to get this one right. Will they? Probably not.
Well, I'm just going to add a little bit more about the Dolphins and we'll move on. So, look, I think Chris Greer deserved to be fired because of the 2020 draft. He did a great job in 2021. He drafted Waddle, who set the rookie record for receptions and over 1,000 yards. Look, he's not Jamar Chase. I'll admit that. I'm not trying to say that, but he had a pretty darn good year. And he picked Jalen Phillips, the defensive end out of Miami, with 8.5 sacks. Although it seems like he had the majority of them like in 2 games. But irregardless, both those first-round picks look pretty good. But 2020, on the other hand, yeah, that's where he should be fired, okay? I mean, picking Tua over Herbert. Now, there's rumors that Flores wanted Herbert over Tua. And basically it was Greer who wanted Tua, okay? And then picking Austin Jackson, the tackle out of USC, who's been horrible, okay, so far. And then Noah Inbagni, a cornerback out of Auburn. I mean, you didn't need a cornerback. you could have used that pick on a running back. I mean, the Dolphins' best running back was Duke Johnson, who was a street signing in late October because the Dolphins had COVID issues with their running backs. What's that tell you? So I think Chris Greer is the bigger problem with the Dolphins than Brian Flores. But that being said, Flores and Greer weren't getting along, and you can't have your GM and your coach not getting along. You just, one of them was going to go. I wish it had been Greer, not Flores, but what's done is done. Now the Dolphins have to get the right hire, and of course, they haven't shown they've been able to do that. And I'm not optimistic that they're going to get it right this time, but we'll see. All right, let's move along. So, like I hinted earlier, as my phone rings, of course.
Is that a landline?
Yeah, there's a landline behind me.
There's a bunch of kids watching this video. What is that noise?
We have a landline, okay.
A mysterious device that is behind Chris.
Yeah, there it is, right over that way there, behind me. So, all right. So, yes, mobile sports betting is legal in New York State now. It's insane. I mean, to pick up your phone, your cell phone, not your landline, by the way, and be able to place a sports bet. And for me personally, I'd rather do it on my computer. I mean, I've done. Not that I've made a ton of bets. I've made a few, I'll be honest, Eric. But I've done it on my computer. I just think the screen's bigger. It's easier to see some things, and you can get more real estate and stuff. But I've enjoyed using my computer over my phone. But, yeah, I'll use my phone. I've made plenty of sports bets on my phone over the last couple of years going across the border of Pennsylvania. But this is just incredible. I mean, we weren't expecting it this early. We weren't. I really thought we weren't going to get it until at the earliest the conference championship games, definitely by the Super Bowl. To get it the last weekend of the regular season was amazing. And, I mean, everything's changed. I mean, New York State, everything is changed. And Robert knows this better than I do, but the information that came out on Monday that the number of pings for making bets in New York State was by far number one in the country over Jersey and Nevada and Pennsylvania and all the other states that have mobile sports betting. So this is just absolutely bonkers. And of course, we have to be responsible. We can't go too crazy, but it's just nice that we have it now. We should have had it from the get-go. And Andrew Cuomo didn't want it at the time until COVID, and he realized he needed tax revenue. But we've got it now, and it's a good thing for New York State to have it. So, Robert, your thoughts on mobile sports betting up and going in New York State?
Well, it's been a long time coming, as you alluded to, Chris. That after the Supreme Court's ruling a few years back, and that paved the way for the legalization of sports betting. The next obvious step is the mobile betting part, and as we know, New Jersey's been reaping the rewards of this. In one of the stories I wrote, I found a reference to, in a separate story, to how they performed in September. They had $1 billion haul, and most of that was from bets placed on mobile platforms. So that gives you an idea of what New York could get to, down the road. That you're not only getting bets, at the casino, but for the most part, people are placing bets, on their phones. It's easy. You can just add money to it. They've got tons of promotions going on right now. There's 4 mobile sports books that have opened up. Obviously, FanDuel and DraftKings are the leaders there. Caesars and Bet Rivers has one, and then we're waiting on a handful of others to open up. They're just awaiting regulatory approval. So it's big. I mean, it's great timing for New York because it's coming right as the NFL playoffs are starting. This is a big betting time, especially as we get to the Super Bowl, and there's obviously betting on the game, and then there's various props available. So it should be fun. It adds as long as you're responsible with it. And that's an important thing. There's a lot of naysayers out there, this is going to create a lot of gambling addicts. Well, tell that to the grocery stores that offer lottery tickets. Yep. Tell that to the, various different ways that you could bet before. A illegally, but on a mobile device. So, this, adds a regulatory element to it. I think it is important to be responsible, just like anything else, just like drinking. You don't want to have an 18 pack in one sitting. You got to be responsible with it. So, I think as long as that happens, it should be a successful venture in New York for a lot of these sports books.
Justin, I'll let you talk in a second. I just got to add something what Robert said. And that is a good point, Robert, because I'll tell you, I used to volunteer at bingo for my kids' school, St. Joseph's. And I used to volunteer bingo. And what I used to do is I used to sell pull tabs. And it was crazy. You'd have these, I hate to say old ladies. I mean, senior citizens, okay? And I would open up a box of pull tabs. There'd be like 200 pull tabs. And they would be sold within 30 minutes, if that. And the thing is, this is the funny thing. This is the part that cracks you up, Robert. It was like I open up the box, and the person would say, I would like try to pull some. It's like, no. I want to pick the spot of the box where they're from, the ones I'm buying. So I would literally have to hold the box up, and they would point to what part of the box that they wanted their pull tabs from, and I had to pull them out. And I swear to God, it was insane. And there was these two women that I remember. Don't know their names, but I know their faces. And they would spend at least $100 a night on pull tabs. Bonkers. So, it's not just young guys, well, like us. Young guys like us who like to do this. It's people of all ages and all genders like to gamble. But again, you have to be responsible about it and know when to say when. So, all right, Justin, I'm sorry for keeping you waiting there. Go ahead.
This guy right here, that's a young guy. This guy right here, young guy. This guy, not a young guy.
Middle-aged. I'll admit I'm middle-aged, but I'm young at heart, though.
Yeah.
For me, the not young guy is this way. So I guess our layouts are all different. Yeah, I don't. Sorry, I didn't want to show off a different connotation there. So sorry for that. But yeah. Anyway, I mean, to me, this is overdue. I mean, it's great for the state. We've all obviously seen up close kind of what COVID's done financially for New York State. Not to get too political, you could certainly make a case that was happening before COVID hit. So, hey, here's easy money for the state because people obviously want to do this. They're willing to put large and small amounts toward gambling, and New York is going to profit off that. I know, just speaking to some of my friends, hockey friends, last night, guys are just betting left and right on NHL action, who's scoring goals on a specific night. Obviously, in hockey, it's the puck line for the spreads. Nice little phrase there. One thing I noticed, in hockey, all the puck lines, it's only a goal and a half for every game. Like, it's not like football, like where you get a 3-point spread, a 5-point spread, whatever. Hockey, everything is, which I think is kind of interesting. I guess that's just the case with sports that don't have as much scoring. But hey, it's great. I placed a bet last night, a nice $5 bet on a 2-team parlay. Neither side of my parlay cashed out, so that's kind of a bummer. But it's just something that for someone who's already watching a lot of sports, hey, I get a little bit more of an investment in the game. So. As long as you're doing it responsibly, you're not gambling away your house or your car. I don't see anything wrong with it. I'm interested to see financially how this impacts the state over the next couple months through the rest of football season, and then through the rest of the year when the big dog in town, the NFL, isn't going on. You only have baseball and such. So we'll see how much the interest in gambling in the state continues or wanes a little bit when it's baseball season only, and maybe you got hockey and basketball playoffs going on. I am leaning toward it's going to be just fine, but I'm interested to see.
Yeah. Well, one thing that Robert and I have been talking about, Justin, is promos, because opening weekend there were tons of, I should say tons, but there were promos to start an account with a certain book. I mean, Caesars was giving out a $300 bonus. FanDuel gave out a $100 bonus. I forgot what DraftKings was. I think they might have been 100 too. And the idea of giving you free money to gamble, I mean, it's like literally giving a person a few candy bars, like here's some candy, you know. The idea is to get you addicted, obviously, in Tibet. And you know, it's going to be interesting, you know, because there's still 5 other sports books that have not gone live yet in New York State. And it's going to be interesting to see what goes on with these promos, because, and Robert can speak about this better than I can, but the tax rate for these sports books is 51% in New York State. That's high, very, very high. It's tied for the highest in the country with New Hampshire. I think New Jersey's around 13% or something. So, you know, for these sports books to make money, you know, they're going to have to do some things differently in New York compared to their other states they operate in. And the promos, and I read some story that said, yeah, we're going to give out a lot of promos for opening weekend, whatever. But after a while, we're not going to really have many promos because we have to make money, because it's going to take 2 to 3 years for some of these sports books to become profitable in New York State. So it's going to be interesting to see how promos are going to work in New York State. And if you take advantage of those promos and you win, getting your money. That's another thing we've been talking about too. So, all right. You guys ready to pick some NFL playoff games?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do a little recap. I believe we were all 1-3 last week, right?
Yeah.
And for the season, I'm still on top, 36-35. Robert is 30-41. Is that correct? And Justin
right, yeah.
is 26 and 26 and something. We'll just leave it at that. So we got 6 playoff.
Coming on strong prior to this week.
Yeah, you were. You were 3-1 the week before, so you're 4-4 the last 2 weeks of your 500. You know, it's a little bit different now that we have mobile sports betting. They give you the idea that usually I keep track of these games pretty closely during the weekend as the games go along. I wasn't keeping track of any of these games. I was keeping track of my sports bets instead. It was really weird. Not like, oh yeah, that's right, we have our NFL picks here. So all right, so 6 games. Let's get right to it. Vegas at Cincinnati. Cincinnati a 5.5-point favorite. Go ahead, Justin. Who do you like?
You know, the Raiders are just one of those teams where nothing they do would surprise me. I thought, especially their defensive line, looked really impressive against the Chargers. I thought the Raiders were going to lose that game. Derek Carr didn't necessarily have to be Superman for them to win. He took care of the ball, threw a couple touchdowns, but wasn't exactly throwing it up and down the field. He might have to against the Bengals. You never know. I mean, the defensive line can certainly impact Joe Burrow. You know, he's kind of one of those quarterbacks who likes to hold on to the ball. He doesn't have the best offensive line. So I could see a scenario where the Raiders just kind of beat up Burrow for 3 hours and keep this game close. But the Bengals are just so explosive. They were able to rest a couple guys last week, including Joe Burrow. So I'll take the Bengals, even though this is a pretty big spread. I think the Raiders, I think their Super Bowl was last week, even under the weird circumstances of that game and how it ended. I like Cincinnati.
Go ahead, Robert.
You know, I went and looked back at, because this is a rematch. These two teams met up just a couple of months ago. And the Bengals, the score suggests that the Bengals whooped the Raiders. It was a 32-13 final score. But when you look at it, really, it came down to the fourth quarter because it was a one-score game. And it was a real tight game. The Raiders playing them tight. And, the Bengals took advantage of a turnover, I think, blew the game open a little bit. I think this will be a much closer game. At the time, the Raiders weren't playing that well. They're coming off a high, beating the Chargers. They've been playing pretty well, pretty good football lately. I think the Bengals will win. I'm going with the Raiders to cover.
Ooh, okay. So I'm going with the Bengals to cover the 5.5. I think, like Robert said, that they're rested. I think they're anxious to get that playoff jinx to end. They have not won a playoff game since 1990. That is the longest drought in the NFL. The Raiders, like you said, Robert, I think last week was their Super Bowl. And, it was an emotional win. I'm sorry, Justin said that. An emotional win. Look, their defense was horrible. The way they let the Chargers go down the field twice and convert, 3rd and 21, 4th and 21. I mean, that's not a good omen, okay? They should have lost that game, to be honest with you. They absolutely should have lost that game. So I'm going with the Bengals to cover the 5.5. So, all right. Our next game, Robert's Buffalo Bills. Back in the playoffs. This is the third year in a row? And 4 out of the last 5?
4 out of the last 5, yeah.
Wow, amazing. I remember that drought. They hadn't made the playoffs in over 15 years, and now they're regulars. But, of course, they just can't go to the playoffs and have an easy first game. They've got to play their arch rival, their nemesis, the New England Patriots. And, of course, we all remember what happened the last time Buffalo hosted New England at Highmark Stadium. It was the windy game on Monday night where Mac Jones only attempted 3 passes, and somehow the Patriots got a long run and won the game. Now, to be honest and to be forthright, a couple weeks later, the Patriots hosted the Bills, and the Bills absolutely cleaned their clocks. Josh Allen had a great game. Now, I know the temperature is supposed to be around 0 on Saturday night in Orchard Park. I don't know what the winds are supposed to be yet. But I like to think that Buffalo learned their lesson and that the Bills team we saw beat New England soundly is the team that we will see play in Orchard Park. So I am taking the Bills to cover the -4 over New England. Robert, go ahead. Who do you like?
It's adorable that you actually mention your pick first, in a game that you clearly know what direction I'm going to go in here. I think that that game that you mentioned, Chris, left a sour taste in the Bills' mouth because, I think they approached that a little too cautiously because of the wind, and the Patriots made them pay for that decision. You saw how the Bills moved the ball in the last in the fourth quarter of that game, and it made you wonder, like, where was this the whole time? Now. They needed to execute better in some of those situations, and I think they could have won that game. But, I think that they learned some lessons from that, which is, you can't be too passive in this weather. You do have to be somewhat aggressive, especially in certain situations, because teams like the Patriots, led by Bill Belichick, will make you pay. I am taking the Bills to win and cover in this one, and doing so to ensure that our good friend Bob Sosi will join us on the program ahead of the Super Bowl. We don't need any excuses for Bob not to join us. This idea of the Patriots playing in the Super Bowl, come on, it's not going to happen. We want Bob on the show, so hopefully that's going to happen, courtesy of the Buffalo Bills.
Justin, who do you like?
For all the talk and the questions after the Bills lost that Monday night game about just what an embarrassment it was and blah, blah, blah. Hey, they didn't play their game, obviously, but it's a 4-point game. Am I right? It wasn't like the Patriots went into Buffalo and won by 3 touchdowns. It was still a very winnable game for the Bills. And those conditions, as I said when we discussed the rematch, those conditions were perfectly suited for the game the Patriots wanted to play. Even though it's going to be cold, I don't think that the Bills will be as hampered by the weather as they were that time. I think you have on the Patriots side a quarterback who has openly admitted doesn't like cold weather, hasn't really played in cold weather, he hasn't played well in cold weather. Mac Jones has not exactly had the finest final quarter of the season here.
He's a rookie.
Right. And, but I think you look at how they were mid-season, and he was like the shoo-in for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Yeah. I don't think he's going to win that now. I think he really struggled down the stretch. And, the thing with the playoffs, it's often that the teams that can win the most ways are the teams that are going to advance. And I think the problem with the Patriots is, they can win a 13-10 game, a 20-17 game, just based on their defense being sound, and they're going to, shorten the game with their running attack. But at some point, Mac Jones is going to have to make some plays. And if you're telling me he's got to do it in Buffalo in cold weather against Josh Allen, I would imagine he's going to have to throw it more than 2 or 3 times. I don't think he can get it done. I think the Bills take care of business and really set up what could be a potentially very storybook postseason run for Robert's Bills, because next week, guess who's up if the Bills win? The Kansas City Chiefs. We all want to see that matchup. I think the Bills get it done here.
Yeah, if there's a prop bet on Mac Jones throwing a pick 6, I'd take it, because that's what he did last week against the Dolphins. So, rookie quarterbacks in the playoffs, you don't know what you're going to get, and I'm not really optimistic on Mac Jones. So, all right, our next game, the Philadelphia Eagles at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers defending Super Bowl champs, 8.5-point favorites at home. Robert, who do you like?
This is I think with this spread, it's a bit of a trap game. Potentially for the Buccaneers, because this is a team that they've had some struggles down the stretch here. Go back to that Jets game a couple weeks ago. They almost lost that game, and it seems that opponents. It kind of reminds me of the 2020 Chiefs in a way, that they've been in some of these close games that you wouldn't think that the Buccaneers of all teams would have to. Would be in these games, but here they are. They played that. They lost to the Saints, obviously. Almost a month ago. Almost lost to the Jets. Those Panthers games are a wash for me. But I'm going to ride with the Eagles covering here.
Ooh.
I think that this game, just the way that Tampa Bay has been playing. I think that the Eagles can make things a little interesting, and it reminds me a little bit of that Washington game that the Bucs played in the playoffs last season. I believe it was in the wild card round. That coming in, you look at the Buccaneers and you say, wow, this team should cruise by Washington, and yet Washington put together a great effort and really made that a 1-score game and kept it close. I think that the Eagles can do the same. And I think they have the right combination, solid defense, great rushing attack. I think that's going to pose problems for the Buccaneers. And that's a way to keep Brady off the field too, if you can run the ball well. So I think the Bucs will win. I think it'll be closer than what this spread suggests.
Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, how about that old Spitfire Tom Brady? Comes to the NFC and just gets 2 absolute layups in the first round. Last year you guys mentioned Washington. That Washington kept that game close, but I don't know if it was ever seriously in doubt. And then this year he gets the Eagles that we were looking at the beginning of the season was probably going to be the last place team in a terrible division, and they surprised. Jalen Hurts, for those fantasy football players out there, was one of the nice surprises this year. Had a really, really good season for a guy I'm not sure many expected a lot of production from. But I just don't think this is a good matchup for the Eagles, even setting aside the fact that, I think they're obviously the weakest team in the playoff field here. I disagree with you, Robert. I think that the Buccaneers have a strong run defense, and that's the only way the Eagles really score points is because they run the ball. So you're telling me that Jalen Hurts is going to have to beat you with his arm? I'm skeptical he's not going to make at least a couple mistakes. And then on the other side, this Eagles defense, they finished middle of the road pretty much in all the statistics. Even though the Buccaneers are obviously not the team they were even a few weeks ago because of all the injuries, I still think they can move the ball pretty well. I have a hard time seeing a path to victory here for the Eagles on the road in Tampa. So I'm going to take Tampa Bay to get it done. I think this is going to be probably a 2-touchdown game, honestly.
Well, this is interesting because, Robert, I'm also picking the Eagles to cover the 8.5. That's a big. Yeah. No, I'm serious. I wrote it down before we even started. I picked the Eagles. Okay, so again, Eagles, I know they didn't play a lot of their starters on that Saturday night game against the Cowboys. They got blown out. I really do think the Eagles can keep it within 8.5. I don't think they're going to win, although you never know. But still, I think they lose by 7 points. And last I checked, 7 does not cover 8.5. So, they can run the ball, and I think that the Buccaneers offense is, not what it used to be. They've had some injuries and things. So I think the Buccaneers they're going to win, but they're not going to cover the 8.5. So, all right.
Another, by the way, worth noting, another rematch from the regular season. These two teams did play, and the Buccaneers won by 6, 28-22.
Next game, the San Francisco 49ers at the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys are 3-point favorites. Go ahead, Robert.
I think I saw a lot of the Cowboys games down the stretch, partly because Dak Prescott was my fantasy quarterback. He certainly, faded a little bit down the stretch. I know that we look at that, a couple of those performances and say, wow, he put up great numbers against, teams that really didn't have anything to play for. Dallas, padded their stats against the Eagles that, they were already in, and, they rested a bunch of their players. So I don't know what to make of the Cowboys. They have some great defensive players, Micah Parsons, Trevon Diggs, but teams have been able to move the ball against them this year. And then I look at the offense, and I don't think, certainly in the second half of the season, they've lacked that consistency, which is a bit surprising given all the weapons that they have. Dak has, CeeDee Lamb to throw to, Amari Cooper, Dalton Schultz, an up and coming tight end there. And then he's got, running back Ezekiel Elliott still. So, with that offense, you would think that it would be able to produce, much more consistently. I'm going with the 49ers here. I think that, with that defense and then with what they bring on offense, they can be a difficult out in these playoffs. And I think there'll be a hard out for Dallas. I think that, with what the Niners bring, on offense, they've got Jimmy G, but you look at the talent that they have, Deebo Samuel among them. I think they can pose some real problems for Dallas, and I think they'll go in and they'll win that game on Sunday.
Justin?
Well, that Jimmy G injury is kind of really what's the only thing that's holding me back from taking the Niners. I'm just kind of worried about what he's going to be able to do, but it's going to be indoors. Weather's not going to be a factor. Obviously, he was able to do enough to come back and help the Niners win last week against the Rams. So, the 49ers are a dangerous team. They've had their kind of stinkers throughout the season. I think back to that Thursday night game a few weeks ago against Tennessee when Jimmy G got hurt, and they kind of were pretty unimpressive on offense that game. But they're not as nearly as deep as the team that went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, but a lot of the stars are still there between Kittle, Bosa. They have Trent Williams is the best left tackle in football, and he wasn't there a couple years ago, actually. But they just have a lot of talent, and I think in that respect they're very similar to the Cowboys, just a top-heavy team. It's going to come down to what quarterback, I guess, makes least mistakes, and just how much the Niners are going to be able to control the clock with their running attack. But, I think this is a bad matchup for the Cowboys because I think you can run on them. I think that they kind of feast on inexperienced quarterbacks. Jimmy G can make mistakes, but he at least has experience and he's played in big games. So, I think these teams are honestly kind of even. And so that means I'm going to have to take the Niners because they're getting the 3. So San Francisco.
All right. Well, guess what, guys? I'm taking the boys. Yeah, I'm taking the Cowboys. Look, Cowboys, I think they are the better team on both sides of the football, especially on defense. The Niners, great team, no doubt about what they did to the Rams last week was a great win to get in the playoffs. But, look, your old boy, Coach McCarthy there. I mean, I know that the Niners have playoff experience and everything, but I think, McCarthy being the coach of the Cowboys, taking Green Bay, winning a Super Bowl, is going to help. But the Cowboys, to me, are just a more talented team, in my opinion. And you can debate that or disagree. That's fine. I get it. But I just think the Cowboys, every year they find a way to sabotage themselves in the playoffs. Something happens and they don't get to the Super Bowl or whatever. And I'm not saying they're going to get to the Super Bowl this year so far, but I think they win this game. If the point spread was like 6, I maybe would pick the Niners to cover the 6, maybe even 5, but it's 3, not a big number. So I'm going with the Cowboys to cover -3. So I am differing from you guys on that one. So, all right, our next game, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the team that almost didn't make the playoffs if there'd been a tie between the Chargers and the Raiders. And boy, we all wanted that tie. Oh, we wanted that tie. But Ben Roethlisberger gets to play another game, and he's going to Kansas City. And the Chiefs are 12.5-point favorites. That is a large spread for a playoff game. Robert, who do you like?
This is a tricky game because on one hand, these teams played not that long ago, a few weeks ago, and the Chiefs roughed up the Steelers. It was a 36-10 game. And, that certainly, I imagine, was in the back of the minds of the odds makers when they made this line that, these teams just played a few weeks ago. And, the Chiefs looked good and the Steelers didn't. And so 12.5 is the number. I will say, though, that, in the last, since that game, that Chiefs defense hasn't looked the same. You look at that Broncos game and the Broncos played them tough, especially, that Broncos offense was able to move the ball with Drew Lock of all guys, throwing the ball around and running through, carving up the defense. So, this is a bit tough, but I also have trouble, believing that the Chiefs will cover a spread that I pick. It's tempting to say, oh, the Chiefs will blow out the Steelers again, but this is playoff football. The Steelers, they took care of business there in the last couple games of the season against AFC North opponents. That defense really came on and played well to get them those 2 wins. I think they'll continue that in the playoffs. The Chiefs will win, but I think the Steelers cover that 12.5-point spread.
All right. Justin, go ahead.
Ben Roethlisberger was without question one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL this season. It's a joke that the Steelers are in the playoffs. I get, listen, their record obviously dictates that they're in there because they finished with, based on tiebreakers and their tie against the freaking Detroit Lions. Yep. Who would have thought that would come back to be a benefit? But they got the job done the last couple of weeks and won a couple games they needed to, whereas teams that I think would have been 100% more exciting and more competitive in this situation. I'm talking about the Colts and I'm talking about the Chargers. They're on the outside looking in somehow, some way into the disappointment of us all, except for those in Pittsburgh. This game stinks. I'm bummed that we're going to have to watch it. It's going to be an absolute joke. I think the spread isn't big enough. And because of that, I'm going to take the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, yeah, I just remember last year in the playoffs where the Steelers got absolutely trounced at home by the Browns. And this game has that type of vibe to it a little bit. I think the Chiefs are on a mission. I think they're upset. They wasn't upset, but I mean, they wanted the number 1 seed. Obviously, they didn't get it. It went to the Titans. So I think they're pretty motivated. I think the Chiefs turned the switch. It's playoff football. They flipped the switch. Big Ben is going to look old, very old. He's going to have a horrible game, in my opinion. Watch him prove me wrong. But yeah, I like the Chiefs to cover the 12.5. It's a big spread, no doubt about it. But like Robert said, they won 36-10 earlier this year, so I think they can do it again. The idea is obviously they got to go off to that fast start and just absolutely bury Pittsburgh, get away from the run, Najee Harris, and make Roethlisberger throw the football, get pressure on him. Big Ben ain't going to run anywhere, so I think the Chiefs cover the 12.5. Our last game is the Arizona Cardinals at the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are 4-point favorites. Go ahead, Justin.
Well, hey, if there's anything people say about Matt Stafford, really knows when to rise to the occasion, when the delivers in the clutch. No one ever says those things about him. Never playoff game. I get that he was playing the Lions, but this is going to be, a legacy defining season for Matt Stafford, because all the chatter he came into LA was, well, stuff, but you can't blame him. All their struggles over the years, yada yada yada. Look at the situation he's in now. He's up, and he statistically, I think, had a pretty season. He threw for 1 touchdowns. 4,800 there. Was pretty good fantasy quarterback. But the thing with Matt Stafford, I have said a million times, is that he is going to make a breaking mistake, because that's just who he is. That one throw that cost the game, and I think that definitely and ironically be the one that cost the Rams this postseason. I get that the exactly with the fire 2 weeks, but I just have no faith in Matt. I heard a great nickname for him, Matt Stafford, aka Stat, because that had me. Maybe we'll look at this at the end of the game and Matt have 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and have a dumb interception that probably swings this game. I'll take the Cardinals.
All right, Robert.
Yeah, this to me was the toughest game of the week, because I don't know what to make of these two teams. You look at the Cardinals; they got off to a hot start. They were 10-2. Just 6 weeks ago, and then they lost 4 of their last 5, including a game to the Rams. They lost to the Cowboys as well, or they lost to the Colts as well, and they lost to the Seahawks. In an important game for them. I mean, if they win that game, maybe they're in the conversation for the for the division, depending on what happens with the Rams. All this stuff. To me, it just was a blown opportunity by them down the stretch to really show that they belong in the conversation. Among the contenders. The Rams are in a similar position. I mean, they won the NFC West, so things are looking good for them. But you look at how they finished as well. They did have some wins there, but that loss to the Niners, was a killer. I think that hurt their seeding a little bit, and that's why we get this matchup here. I'm going to ride with the Rams in this one, though. I just think that they're playing the better football at the moment. The Cardinals, again, I don't know what to make of them. They've been struggling, down the stretch here, and it doesn't seem like they have the same type of, that same type of consistency that they had earlier in the season, when they really looked like a team that was going to be unstoppable this time of year, with how that offense was playing on the defensive side of the ball as well. But I'm going to go with the Rams. I just think that, they'll be at home. They'll want to make a statement, I think, home playoff game. And Stafford, I think really this is a chance for him to, really get back at those critics. I think Ritz correctly points out that, Stafford, some of the criticism of his play down the stretch here is rightfully due because of how he has played historically. And so this is a chance for him to show that he can rise to the occasion and be the quarterback that the Rams expected him to be when they got him in the offseason. So I'll take the Rams again in this one.
8 interceptions in 4 games. 8 interceptions his last 4 games. You want to talk about guys who are fading down the stretch? Stat Padford is your guy.
Mm-hmm. You gotta love that NFC North hate. So both teams lost their regular.
I like Matt Stafford. You know why? Because he was terrible against the Packers.
Well, yeah, there you go.
Free win every time they played.
I get
so,
you.
Hey, I'm sad that Matt Stafford's out of the division. Just like I'm sad that the Vikings and the Bears are making all these coaching changes. I love all these people. I think they should get lifetime contracts.
Yep. All right.
That's
So
not how it works.
Both teams lost last week, not a good omen, but as you know, they played against each other in the regular season, and each team won on the visitors' field. Okay. So with that in mind, I am going with the Rams to cover the -4. Look at Robert. Robert's like, what are you doing? You're picking the team I'm picking. I can see it. I can read it in your eyes. Your body.
I mean, let's be real here.
Oh, come on.
trying to
look,
protect your 6-game lead.
No, I'm not trying. I made these picks before we went on the air. Okay.
All right. Let's be honest.
And,
let's inform the viewers what exactly is happening here. Certain one of us, I'm not going to point any fingers, but I think you'll be able to deduce who it is. Back some years ago, went on a game show, and it took.
Come on, remote control. Really, that's all you guys. Remote control. You're down by 6 games. You're down by 6 games. Me, the gut, going with like the Shira-isms. Oh, division game, Monday night short rest. And I'm only 1 game over 500, but I got a 6-game lead on you, my friend. Okay, and excuse me that I should be announcing my picks first, so you can automatically go the other way to try to catch up. No. You're going to catch me. You're going to do it legit. Okay. And I'll even next week when we do the division round, I'll pick my games early and I'll show them to my daughter. So she won't be here next week, but I don't do that. Okay. All my picks, and we differ on some, by the way. So it's legit. So anyways, my buddy Dave Coleman, the Rams fan since the mid-'70s. I know he's got to be pretty pumped up for that. I got to drop his name because whenever I hear the Rams, I think of Dave. Dave, he's got Rams 21 for his license plate, by the way. That's how big a Rams fan that he is. Nolan Cromwell was his favorite player growing up, so that's why he's got Rams 21. So if you see a pickup truck in Auburn, Rams 21, that's Dave Coleman. But irregardless, look, the Rams, 4-point spread, not a big number. I think they can cover that, win by 6, at least 6. It's going to be a good game. I would take the over on this one. Both teams have gone for over 50 points total in both their matchups. So I would definitely pick the over on this one, being an indoor game, obviously. But I think the Rams have enough to get it done and cover the -4. So, all right, folks, that is it. It's been fun. Do your choke thing. You're not going to catch me. You might as well get the trophy engraved right now.
Ooh, I'd be careful if I were you.
Yeah, I know. I'm tempting the fates here. And
if I buy that trophy and put your name on it, the old Harvey Hex will be in effect.
Yes, and next week, because there's only 4 games, I'm not going to do a 6-game parlay in the NFL playoffs. That's throwing your money away. But next week, though, it's back to 4 games. I will be putting some money down on my picks. I will put my money where my mouth is, and I will do that. Not going to be a ton of money, but it's going to be a small amount. But I will put my money where my mouth is, and I think we will try to do that moving on when we pick 4 games. That we will actually put money on these parlays and see what we can do. See who can go perfect, the 4-0, and rake in some nice change. So, all right, guys. As always, it's been fun, and folks, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Bet responsibly. Now you can do it on your phone. It's great. It's a new era here in New York. Enjoy, guys. We'll see you next week.